Chogadh. Today is 100 years since the Irish Civil War ended officially. Really, it's still going on. But I want to speak in this video about the end of one war and the start of another. The Civil War in Irish is Cogadh, the War of Friends, and perhaps that what I'm initiating is gCaighdeán, the War of the Standards. By standard I mean the kind of Irish that is taught in schools, and that teachers are taught, and that those unwitting teachers teach to poor unwitting students. Basically I will be talking about how biased the current spelling system is that has come about. I won't have time to talk about everything today. There's 140 pages of material, and I only have about 45 minutes to try and get it done. So I will start. Now, basically, long story short, I'll come back and talk about all this again properly in another video. There was a committee, when Ireland got independence in 1922, there was of course an effort to try and promote the Irish language, but of course they were all different dialects and they weren't sure which dialect they should promote, if any, or should they try to combine them all, or should they return to classical Irish that had already existed before the English destroyed Irish culture. Basically what happened is that there was a need to translate documents into Irish, and there was the problem was that people began finding that the spelling was difficult, or whatever else, perhaps they just didn't understand it. So basically a committee was put together, or a committee was put together to try to decide how Irish would be spelt. They couldn't agree, and what happened is that this man, T.F. O'Reilly, basically submitted his suggestions to de Valera. De Valera wasn't a linguist. He accepted them, and this is why we got stuck with what's called gCaighdeán, Oifigiúil, the official standard. Now, of course, like us all, T.F. O'Reilly had his own politics and his own opinions. So I'm going to give a very, very quick overview of T.F. O'Reilly and his brother, who was actually a very influential figure as well. And then I'm going to rush on and talk about just some of the stupid things that exist in the Gceathramhadh Oifigiúil. And this is really the beginning of what I hope kind of a reawakening in Ireland of what kind of Irish language is being taught to the students in schools. I'm sure that there are a great deal of people that wouldn't agree with the politics or the philosophy behind the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil, and yet they use it. So I'm hoping that this is a very small beginning of people beginning to question that and to ultimately turn away from it and do something new. So T.F. O'Reilly, a rural bourgeois family. This interview here you can watch Johnny Murphy on Alfred O'Reilly on YouTube. He calls this the O'Reilly family from the Stole in County Kerry. The town, they were town bourgeoisie. He said not allowed to play with the other kids on the block. He said that is not uncommon in the history of Irish snobbery. So they were snobs. I'm looking at the wrong screen, am I? Doesn't matter. So T.F. O'Reilly, his older brother, Alfred O'Reilly, he became what's called a Taghta or a member of parliament, basically, in 1923 and 1924 in Cogadh, which were a conservative right-wing party. Now, I suppose I won't have time to go into talking in detail about Irish politics and the history of Irish politics, but you can look up anyway about the War of Independence in Ireland and the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Basically, it was decided that 6 of the counties of the 32 counties of Ireland would remain as part of the United Kingdom, or swollen England, or whatever you want to call it. Some people accepted the treaty, other people didn't. Well, I don't want to say anything too controversial here, but he was in favour of the treaty. He thought it was a good deal, that you should Well, basically, Lloyd George threatened terrible and immediate war if they didn't accept the treaty. There's a complicated history to it. But anyway, he argued that Ireland, being a member of the British Commonwealth, was a good thing. Living off the wealth stolen from other colonised countries was a good thing. He said, God save the king. That was one of the requirements that the Anglo-Irish, the anti-treaty people, didn't want to say an oath to an undemocratically elected individual. But Common Gael were, or at least the pro-treaty people were quite happy to do so. God save the king actually meant, what he said is God save the king actually meant God save the people of Ireland, however that came about, because the King of England was actually only a figurehead standing in for God. Yeah, whatever. Alfred O'Rahilly, he became the head of the University College Cork, and there was one external examiner when he came to visit. Alfred O'Rahilly was a very religious man as well. Ultimately, when his wife died, he went off and became a priest. But the external examiner said that UCC under Alfred O'Rahilly was a convent run by a mad Reverend Mother. Now, what am I doing here? Yes, just to highlight some of the background. Sorry, this is as scattered as anything. But in 1922, Alfred O'Rahilly and this man Darrell Figgis, strange man, they drafted the constitution for the Irish Free State. What the Irish Free State was the name of Ireland after it gained partial independence from England. Alfred O'Rahilly wanted to be on the delegation that was sent to London to try and hammer out this Anglo-Irish treaty, but he had been arrested and was in prison and he couldn't go at the time. Blah blah blah. So then in 1923, Alfred O'Rahilly became a president or a member of Common Gael, this right-wing party. Alfred O'Rahilly had been an apologist for the fascist military group commonly known as the Blue Shirts, and they were the predecessor of the pro-treaty Common Gael. They combined. Well, basically, what happened is that De Valera in 1933 banned the Garda Náisiúnta because he feared that as a fascist group that they were going to organise some military coup or something. So to get around this ban, this fascist group, the Leanta Gorma, they Owen Duffy, who was the leader of the Garda Náisiúnta, William Cosgrave, the leader of Common Gael, and Frank McDermott, the leader of the National Centre Party, they all came together as Fine Gael, with Frank McDermott as the vice president. Eamon de Valera, again, I don't want to go into too much detail here and say half-truths. You can find out who he was. Basically, Eamon de Valera was anti-treaty. These other people were pro-treaty. These fascist group, the Blue Shirts, Fine Gael. Now, so that's just a quick. I don't know. This is an important point, and it drives me mad when people are tarnished by association. So I don't take this as fact, please. But what I'm saying is that it's possible that T.F. O'Rahilly, this man who designed gCaighdeán Oifigiúil, shared his brother's right-wing politics. Monaghan Magan, I know, is related to them, so perhaps he can shed some light on the family history and the politics of the family. There's probably an interesting book to be written there by someone. Quick word about T.F. O'Rahilly then. What I'm saying is that if T.F. O'Rahilly shared the politics of Alfred O'Rahilly, then he would have been quite happy to surrender 6 counties of Ulster to England, which would stand to reason because the way that he designed the spelling of the Gcaighdeán Oifigiúil to a very large extent ignored the dialects of Ulster and is strongly biased towards the southwest of Ireland, but not in any intelligent, consistent way. Although he was, of course, perhaps the greatest Irish language scholar we've had, but anyway, ní bhíonn saoi gan locht. There doesn't be a wise man without fault. 1910, T.F. O'Reilly was a president of the mbliadhain, or the Society for Simple Spelling, which Sean O'Keefe established. And notice that he spells his name. He devised his own spelling system. That is the traditional spelling. Now, I strongly disagree with his proposals, and I don't think he had a particularly deep understanding of phonology. But anyway, that's beside the point. So the Fós Mach, yeah, exactly, Mhí Brian O'Keefe, a fantastic Irish scholar, he married Emer de Valera, who was the daughter of Eamon de Valera, the founder of Fianna Fáil, and this anti-treaty person, and this man who, I suppose in a way, is partially to blame for gCaighdeán Oifigiúil as it currently is. So what happened? Well, basically, T.F. O'Reilly served on a committee charged with devising a reformed spelling of Irish for use in the Constitution of 1937. This group failed to agree. What happened is that O'Reilly's proposals he kind of went behind everyone's back. He was snaky that way. Gave his recommendations to Eamon de Valera. Eamon de Valera was not a linguist, so he just, like all good bureaucrats, they just do what they're told. He accepted the proposals, and yeah, basically to the exclusion of northern dialects. I might as well say it out. Irish learners in what is currently Northern Ireland, the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, should not use the spelling of gCaighdeán Oifigiúil. Get yourself a copy of Dineen's dictionary, go back to the classical spelling. There are many, many problems with the classical spelling, but at least, well, take my word for it for the moment until you have a better understanding of why I'm saying that. At least all the ingredients are there. The gCaighdeán Oifigiúil randomly lops off bits that are important to Ulster dialects. Don't exclude people when you can include them. I think that's a good basis to work from. Now, what I'm going to do in a different video is just to show you the way that T.F. O'Reilly's mind worked. I'll do a different video, perhaps in the coming days, on passages from this book, Irish Dialects Past and Present. It seems that he was obsessed with this idea of war, and the fact that Ulster Irish in some way had been contaminated by Scottish Gaelic. And possibly it's something to be considered, and again, don't spread this as truth. It's a question that I have and not a statement. If T.F. O'Reilly was as religious as his brother, it's a question in my mind of whether one of the reasons that he disliked, it would seem, although he said he didn't, that he disliked, but actions speak louder than words, that he disliked Ulster Irish was in the fact that, again, he thought it was linguistically contaminated by Scottish Gaelic, and perhaps somehow because most people at the time in Scotland were Protestants, that he thought that they were somehow contaminated by Protestantism. That's a question I have, not a statement. So again, please don't spread that as a fact. That's something that somebody might be able to shed more light on. Now, that's the role of T.F. O'Reilly and his politics and his partitionist politics, let it be said. So if you do not agree with the partition of Ireland, then you shouldn't use the partitionist spelling of gCaighdeán Oifigiúil. Yeah, plain and simple. Now I'm going to skip all that, and I'll come back to it another time. What I want to talk about now are, maybe just for a half an hour, and I'll have to stop then, some of the inconsistencies of the gCaighdeán Oifigiúil, some of its faults. I'll make another video about the philosophy of spelling. People have strange ideas of what spelling actually is. Basically, it's a proposal, like any other scientific proposal, of what something it's a representation of something, in the same way that a map is a representation of a city or a town or whatever. The spelling is a representation of the phonology, of how certain sounds work in combination. So some spelling systems have less explanatory power, are worse at explaining what's actually going on in reality than other spelling systems. Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil is, to those who have a linguistic understanding, which unfortunately isn't, those people aren't very high in number, is a steaming mountain of shit. Let it be said. Anyway, mar hig agus skrif Padre Godinine English. As Padre Godinine said in the year 1904, and get yourself a copy of this man's dictionary, particularly if you're from the 6 counties. It's also free online in some sort of romanized form. A letter silent in speech has often a useful part to play in preserving the historical sense relations between words. Now, so in my own model of on the truth of the situation, what I would say is that, and again I've skipped kind of what I mean by fichead le fógraim, basically a thought given sound. That's what a word is it not? And then that word is written down. But of course nowadays people tend to think of word as something that is written primarily, but word, even the root word in Indo-European, refers to something sounded. It's a thought or a frame of reality, a model of reality in your mind that you have given some sound to express, to push out. So what happens when this fichead, or I suppose what would you call it? Well, sorry, I forgot the English translation now. This bit of meaning with the sound loses its sound. That doesn't mean that the thought disappears. That person might still have the thought, but the sound might now be gone to represent it. Basically, my whole point is that that fichead, whatever you want to call it, that's jargon. That thought can still be represented by the sound that used to represent it, even though that the sound is now gone. So one thing that I often say to people, ná saoil go rud gan feim, rud gan fuaim. Don't imagine that something without a sound is something without a function. Of course, all punctuation, these symbols, certainly in most languages, don't have sounds. That doesn't mean that they're useless. This also goes for things that expressed something but nowadays don't have a sound, though they used to. Sorry, that's a very circuitous way of explaining what I'm trying to talk about. Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about for the next half an hour or so is certain sounds that were taken out. Not saying that these are the most important, these are just the ones that I've happened to jot down in this particular order. And just to highlight the inconsistencies and the dialectal bias that T.F. O'Rahilly wrote into his proposals of Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil. So, for example, UMH, ACH, any word with this, so dúch, a sand dune, this was left as this spelling, DUMH, ACH, but the word dúch, with probably the same pronunciation in most counties, was reduced to dúch. So first of all, you have this inconsistency. Why do they leave the MH? MH was often left as, the difference between MH and BH is that, correctly or historically, MH is accompanied by nasalization. So this would be dúch with a nasal vowel, dúch, whereas this has a purely oral vowel, dúch, dúch, dúch. Now, the problem with this spelling, and I'll come back and talk about this later on, is that in Ulster and this and in the province of Meath, it would seem, which takes in the northern half of Dublin, So people from North County Dublin should be raging. That this was dua, which isn't evident from the spelling where CH has become H. This spelling suggests that the pronunciation in Ulster is du, which it's not, but dua. Now, of course, there are probably, when I'm talking about Ulster Irish, what I'm talking about is native traditional Irish before it was, well, that's what traditional means, to pass on. The passing on of Irish stopped many, many generations ago, depending on where you are. In some places it continues, but even the weaker native speakers nowadays probably learn a large amount of their Irish from school rather than at home, and they learn this gCaighdeán crap rather than the correct historical form. So dua. So why was this left and not that? Blah blah blah. I'll come back to up with this. Another point that affects Ulster and Meath, and again that includes the northern half of County Dublin and Louth and whatever. Is that the sound ng, or basically on or ing, when it is an unstressed syllable, so that means after a vowel that isn't the first vowel in the word. Here we have kuang originally. Now in Munster and Connacht mostly, this has become reduced to kung in pronunciation, which is why the spelling, which is biased towards southwest dialects, spells it as kung. But this then suggests that the Ulster pronunciation of the word is kung, but it's not. It's kung, because what happened is that the ng in an unstressed syllable, here we have an unstressed vowel, the stress is on the first syllable, here's the second vowel, there we have ng, that ng turned into an nn. Mh, broad, that means followed by a, o, u. In many cases, and many speakers would actually have retained its older, more correct if you like, two-syllable pronunciation, kuan, or kuan, and other speakers reduced it to kun. But regardless, my whole point is that it is only from the classical spelling that all dialects can derive regularly, following rules, following patterns, can regularly derive their pronunciation. So this caters to everyone. This only caters to the southwest of Ireland, which is no surprise, again, considering, or as it would seem, TF O'Reilly was quite happy to exclude Ulster as being a part of Ireland and as being part of Irish culture, Irish discourse. Right, there are other words like this. I haven't jotted them down. I've lost about 1,000 words in recent work. I wouldn't be great for saving things. Right, another thing. So misspelling. Any word where A for the MH was changed to AMH. In North Munster and in Ossory, which is basically the practically all of the county of modern Kilkenny, and the western three baronies of County Laois, or Queen's County, as we better called. Where so in those places, A for the MH A has become on or on, so a nasalized vowel. So, for example, the classical spelling of the word enemy, even though that this ending is actually the dative case, would have been pronounced moid. Now, that's not evident from the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil spelling, maud, where AMHA, it would seem, came to be pronounced mood, with again a nasal vowel, mood. So that is northern Munster and Ossory. In Musgree, so basically in northwest Cork, and probably for most of East Cork, and probably a good share of Limerick as well. This A for the MHA has became a nasal A. So and in Kerry and probably southwest Cork, A for the MHA has become ow. So I'll give you some examples of this distinction now. Now, so the classical spelling of the word for bladder is this. there's a rule in Munster that if you have in 3 different syllables, if you have long vowel, short vowel, long vowel, the stress stays on the first vowel. Whereas if you have short vowel, long vowel, the stress goes on the second long vowel. So the gCaighdeán Oifigiúil misspelling suggests that the pronunciation in Munster is launan, but it's not, because the real form that is mismodelled by the gCaighdeán Oifigiúil is actually this, the classical spelling, where the stress, first of all, is on the first syllable. So the original pronunciation would have been, or the original, the classical pronunciation, lanvanan, something like that. And then what happened is that in the various dialects, the A for the MHA underwent different changes. So in County Cork, the A for the MHA, so the anva just became or in Cork they tend to pronounce it a, so lanan, whereas in Kerry it became ow, so that became launan. A similar word is this the word for crawling, launcan, in Kerry, launcan, whereas in Mooscree, in northwest Cork, it is lacan, or lacan. Now here already, perhaps if you're paying attention, you'll notice that there's an inconsistency. Why was Lavalman reduced to this, but Laucan was left as a 3-syllable word? That's just one of the thousands and thousands of inconsistencies in the gCaighdeán Oifigiúil. Another example, the word for enemy in Irish. Now, the historical form is máva, which I think it's possibly a folk etymology, but it comes from ne ama, I do not love, like in the Latin word amare, to love. So your enemy is someone that you don't love. I think this form, someone has mentioned to me that this still survives the historical nominative in Connemara, but in many places the dative has come to be used as the nominative. Right, so the classical spelling, at least, of the dative was námhaid, right? Again, in Kerry, that is pronounced as maud, and in Ballymacoda as well, actually, which is interesting. I'll come back and talk about this word later. There seems to, this word is slightly complicated. But in Ulster, and again, we shouldn't be surprised that Tia Forahali excluded the Ulster pronunciation. This word, although it's spelt as mavwid with a short a, the correct historical form is, or at least an older form, is survives in Ulster, where it's pronounced mawid, for mawid, with a long a. Now, the rule is that a father before a consonant cluster becomes short. So then in other forms, we'll say in the plural, navdje, for navdje becomes navdje, and it's from this that we get an older, still found in poetry and songs in Munster, nide, or naide in parts in the Dacia and Waterford, naide. But again, these all follow rules. These are all simple instructions that a child can follow. So most people's reading anyways is rather intuitive. They don't understand what they're reading, even though there is a system behind it that goes for English and Irish. Another example, gCaighdeán Oifigiúil, I suppose the historical dative, rámhain, a spade. This is the historical nominative, rávan. Also, I should say as well, the writing that I have here in black, in bold, is my own proposed spelling. I won't have time to talk about that today, but I will come back soon and talk about it. So again, A for the MHA inside in a word, disregarding morpheme boundaries, becomes A in or A in Cork, or at least Muscree. So Ran is the word for spade in Muscree, whereas in Kerry, again, regularly, A for the MHA has become Ow. So the pronunciation nowadays is round, and actually it's understood as RANN now, so that the Tishel Geniduch is nÉirinn, even though that there are some older speakers perhaps. I've seen it noted that the genitive of some older speakers have it as is it Raine? Again, where with the shortening of the A fada. I think I'll have to double check that, but there is an alternative form anyway. But again, it's understood as RANN. But anyway, another example, and again shows the inconsistency as the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil. The classical spelling is this. So again, we would expect it to become Ow in Kerry and A in Cork. In this case, they've gone with this this pronunciation, Tosk, whereas in this spelling they've gone with the short vowel pronunciation. Same with the short vowel here, and in the word, but not here, not in the word roving. So again, higgledy-piggledy, random. Níor Tausk not Toidish. There was no report or news of him, whatever. There was no sign of him. So that's just one example, we'll say, dealing with A for the MH. Right, I'm sure there are plenty other words that could be added to that list. Flying on. Yes, again, this example of apple, Ool, where this soft B is, of course, historically related to the P in English. This is the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil spelling Ool, even though that many dialects in Ulster, and indeed even in North Connacht and even in South Connacht, would have maintained the more historical, the older disyllabic pronunciation, Ool. It wouldn't have been, I mean, it doesn't put it from understanding to say to someone, oh, the BH is pronounced as the W and the word is pronounced Ool as opposed to Ool. But anyway, here again, the word duvach was changed to duch, even though that this clear ACH survives in Ulster dialects, dua, whereas the misspelling in the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil suggests that the Ulster and Meath pronunciation is, and when I say Ulster I include Louth, which was historically a part of Ulster up until 1596, I think. So that wrongly suggests that the pronunciation is du, which it's not, but dua. The same with sua, which again is wrongly suggested to be su in Ulster. Another example, Dwan, kidney. For some reason, this is spelt with a U in the Gceaghdeán Oifigiúil, which perhaps suggests that the pronunciation is Dwan, or Du'an with a short O. Du'an with 2 syllables, or Dwan with 1 syllable. Perhaps less wrong would be to spell it with the U fada, or indeed, because there are many dialects that still actually pronounce this as a W, as if there were a W there. They could have just left the original spelling, and that would also show that it was related to the word dove as in a little black thing. That's what a kidney is, a little black thing. Here was a random example. 9 people. Lloyd in his book Doing It in the Mhí shows that the Meath pronunciation was a trisyllabic word, Nínawar, which we would expect because there is what's called an epenthetic vowel. Basically, epenthetic just means inserted. There's an inserted vowel there between the sonorant RLN and a voiced fricative or stop. Voiced fricative or voiced stop. So Nínawar was the pronunciation in Meath, and if you're from Meath, don't say Nínawar anymore, as you're probably mistaught in schools, but Nínawar, right? You do have your own history and linguistic culture. Revive it. There's one example I want to include because I think it's quite funny. okay, just one more example here before I go on to the other ones. Again, the Caighdeán Oifigiúil misspelling suggests that this word, an adversary, often a word used for the a devil, or the kind of, nowadays I suppose it can mean the kind of a joker as well. The Caighdeán Oifigiúil misspelling suggests that this word is or showed with the stress on the second syllable, and this applies to Munster and at least the county Kilkenny, if not slightly further afield into the province of Leinster. So or showed, but the pronunciation in fact is or showed, and the reason for that is that, again, possibly a fada there. Now DH has quite a complicated history, but basically, again, we have long vowel, short vowel, long vowel. So because we have long, short, long in Munster and in Ossory, the stress goes on the long vowel of the first syllable. So all of which showed would have been the classical pronunciation, all for showed. And of course you can see that in my own suggested spelling, much closer to the word adversary, which is what it comes from. This is one of the spellings in the Caighdeán Oifigiúil, of it showed, which would be pronounced or showed anyway, where the slender BH disappears after the long vowel regularly. But its equivalent in Scotland, with a broad v, suggests actually that the correct form, or the more historical form, is with the broad dv. So this would make this a misspelling, a mismodelling, or at least a less historical form. But again, this idea of that silent consonants actually can have a function. They have a function in showing the number of syllables, because that matters in Munster. Right, now, sorry, I think the next example, okay, we're not there yet. Often DHE was cut out in the middle of a word, so the classical pronunciation for a milch cow, oideach, was left as oideach, whereas we might expect the misspelling AI for the OCH, or slightly less wrong, AOI for the OCH. My own proposed spelling for that word is this, which in Munster we pronounced, and in Connacht ich, in Ulster iach. But anyway, so the same with this word luich, fond of lays, poetical, songful, celebrated in lays or songs. Why did they leave these words unbastardized? Obviously, they thought that they would make the word unrecognisable if they changed the spelling, if they butchered it, but they were quite happy to butcher the other words, and of course they show there that they had at least some understanding, or at least that T.F. O'Rahilly, if he was solely responsible, as the case may seem, well, that his proposals were just implemented by other good box-ticking bureaucrats in the translation department, that they understood that the whole point of spelling is familiarity for the eye, yeah. So not to make the word unrecognisable. Now, another important thing that also affects Ulster, and also one of the reasons why T.F. O'Rahilly was quite happy to ignore it, is that IDHE after the first vowel in a word. So, for example, bui, the word for yellow, the reduced spelling in the Caighdeán Oifigiúil suits Munster and Connacht fine for the most part, well, Southern Connacht at least. But of course, the more historical pronunciation that survives in County Mayo and in Ulster and cling to it. So if you're in this one of the 6 counties, pronounce the word buie with 2 syllables. Buie, crie, heart, not cree. Of course, that was there too, but stick to the. I always suggest in any language, if you have 2 pronunciations available, go with the older one, because the older one can be used to derive the newer one usually. So it caters to more people. It's fairer in a way. Now, So this spelling, well, I suppose the classical spelling was Cogadh, with a slender CR, Cogadh, that unexpectedly became a broad CR, Cogadh. This is the spelling found, I suppose, later in classical spelling, that was then reduced to where the IDHE became an oifigeamhail. But again, that suggests that the word is correctly a monosyllabic word. This spelling excludes Ulster and Meath, whereas this spelling, or at least this one, caters to everyone. So when you can cater to everyone, why only cater to a certain group of people? These are my own suggested spellings here. I'll go back and talk about my own system later. One of two options, where this is the nominative and this is the dative ending in a vowel, suggesting that which means that it causes chefu, or the system where a chefu is shown by, a lenition of a consonant is shown by this apostrophe. Okay, so that's IDHE. The same goes for IGHE, but I'll come to examples of those later on, probably not in this video. Another interesting example is DH being removed from the end of words. So, well, commonly people would see this as the word fag. The historical pronunciation was fez. I'm kind of running out of time now to talk about what I want, but so fez is the classical pronunciation. Most dialects, the symbol, well, the sound e before a non-palatal consonant, a broad consonant, became a, so faz. Then z became a r, far, and various things happened. That sometimes it disappeared, which is why some people say fa. Other times the velar fricative r became a velar stop, g, which is just a g, a broad g. But so other than in the meaning of length or duration, so for example in the meaning of the word fathom, the Caighdeán Oifigiúil misspells that as feo, even though that the pronunciation is fa, certainly in Kerry, fathom, with the short vowel fa, whereas the plural is fa or fa or feo. So that now the Caighdeán Oifigiúil misspelling mangles the two of these into the one. The same goes for the word fla, which is originally meant a picnic or a feast, I suppose, not a picnic. Thinking of flaog. But again, what's interesting is that most people would now call it the fla ceol with a long a, and the reason behind that is that there's no native word in English that ends with a short vowel. So it would be very counterintuitive for a native English speaker to say the fla with a short a. Much easier for them to say the fla or the flaw. Are you going to the flaw? Though those kind of people tend not to go to the fla. So again, this spelling represents only a few dialects, whereas this has all the ingredients to cater to all the dialects, because again, this is the starting form from which all the dialects derive. So that the singular should be pronounced fla, and the plural then pronounced fla or flaw, depending on the dialect, but not this bastardized higgledy-piggledy confusion that the Caighdeán Oifigiúil creates. Now that's just, I have loads of other examples of that. This is only a taster. Right, this applies to other words, kna, fla, fa, ma, sha. This DH was removed, but of course in County Monaghan, and if you're from County Monaghan, this is the pronunciation you should use. If you're a teacher, this is what you should teach. If you're a student, it's what you should learn. And this goes for County Louth as well, it would seem, that the DH was actually, DH, as I said, became GH sometime around 1200, 1300. Canals became Canal. and that this survived, and that actually, interestingly, the sound before the sound before D or DH, G or GH and S, it would seem, stayed as so that the dumbed down Caighdeán Oifigiúil spelling suggests that these words are pronounced kna, fla, fa, ma, and, well, sha, for some reason. That one doesn't have a father, again, one of the inconsistencies. Whereas, in fact, the Monaghan and Louth pronunciation, certainly for some speakers, preserved the older kner, fler, fer, mer, and cher. And the pronunciation of cher is quite well attested, not only in Louth, but in Armagh as well, and other places. Now, I won't get into this word for goose. This is an interesting history. I'll come back and talk about it later. Now, this will probably be the last thing that I talk about, and I'll stop the video here. That's only, a couple of pages of the 142 that I currently have. So, it would be understood from the misspelling of the Caighdeán Oifigiúil that the following compound words are not compound words, and therefore that in Munster and in County Kilkenny at least, that the stress would go on the second syllable. So this in the Caighdeán Oifigiúil spelling, this doesn't appear to be a compound word, which means that we have a long vowel, so the stress is attracted to the second syllable long vowel in Munster. So we'd expect these to be cuideol, kirkeol, marteol, muceol, asheol, uniol. So lamb meat, chicken meat, beef, pork, venison, and not venison, yes, venison and lamb. Or what's a baby sheep? Uniol, whatever. Whereas these are compound words. Now, compound words in Irish, again, the Caighdeán Oifigiúil doesn't engage with the complexities of compound words in Irish. I'll talk about this in another video. But at least in the older spelling, you can see Caighdeán, you can see that the root word fiol is inside there. Kirkeol, marteol, muceol, osheol, uniol. But again, there are exceptions to their inconsistencies. They are inconsistently inconsistent. They did not remove the FH in the following words. Annual, which is proud flesh, as in the type of flesh that grows out of a wound, annual. We would expect it to be this, annual, but perhaps I suppose the reason that they didn't spell it like this is that there is another word, annual, not that they spell it with the colon, or the hyphen, annual, meaning unknown or strange. Presumably that. Fiol or feidol, this is the Caighdeán Oifigiúil spelling where they leave the FH. If they had removed the FH, this would be the spelling. Not that it's any stranger than some of the other monstrosities that are created. And this one, Oifigiúil, calf meat. Some speakers in Munster have it with a G, Oifigiúil, as opposed to Leol. This is the pronunciation. Again, if they had left the GH, they could at least, the speakers that pronounce it as Oifigiúil could at least assume themselves to be there. Now, I'll finish with this because I think this is funny. If it's necessary to say or to teach that the reason that the stress is on the second syllable in those words is because they were originally compound words, why not just leave them as obviously compound words in the first place? Compound words containing the word fiol, meat. Right? So that's one stupidity of the thousands in the Caighdeán Oifigiúil. So, what might be aptly called the butcher's rule. Probably the solution that the Lucht Multa, that the proposers, or at least the tolerators of the Caighdeán Oifigiúil, which is practically everyone, of course, because they don't understand. Ignorance is bliss, where 'tis folly to be wise. But anyway, so the probable solution to this problem would be to create possibly this additional unhistorical anti-reality rule for words, but only for words that end in E-O-I-L. So, a lehéad seo doríil beidir, the following kind of rule perhaps. In words that contain E-O-I-L in the final syllable, when meat is what has been spoken about, the stress is on the first syllable, but on the second syllable in Munster if what you're talking about isn't meat. Now, of course, there's no need to concoct such a nonsensical, stupid rule when you can simply teach and leave them as compound words, martiol, mukiol, whatever, and then automatically the stress is on the first component, at least without going into the complexities of possibly 4 different categories of compound words. Now, there are plenty others, and there are, about 130 pages more of this kind of thing. So I'm going to stop there now, and I'll try to do many of these videos over the next coming weeks. But I just wanted to again mark the 100 years of the official end of the end of the Civil War, Cogadh, the War of Friends, and I think it's high time to start gCaighdeán and to get rid of this anti-Ulster spelling. I would like people to understand its history, the philosophy that led to it, and if you don't agree, don't use the spelling. You can go on a spelling boycott for your teacher in school, and you can tell them to watch this video. So like and subscribe, and I will be back soon with more gCaighdeán, with more tearing the gCaighdeán to shreds. Right, Slán Tamálín.